The shears closed an inch from Cordelia Ashbourne's ear, and a hand-length of dark chestnut hair fell across the dressing-table mirror, like a curtain coming loose from its rod. She did not flinch. Flinching would have moved the blade, and Lady Marjorie Ashbourne had never been a woman to apologize for clumsiness when she could blame the person beneath her wrist instead. "Hold still, child." Marjorie's voice was light, almost cheerful, the kind of voice a woman uses to instruct a maid laying a fire. She gathered another long lock between her thumb and forefinger and lifted it as if assessing the quality of cloth at a draper's. The shears bit again. Another length of Cordelia's hair slid silently down the silk of her wrapper and joined the first on the floor. "His Grace will be on our drive in 2 hours," Marjorie said, working her way around the back of Cordelia's head with the patient efficiency of a gardener pruning a bush that had grown too prosperous. "I should be very sorry, Cordelia, if anyone were to think that this house had presented him with a bride. It will spare us all an embarrassment." Cordelia counted. She had begun counting at the first cut, and she would count until the last one, because counting was a thing her father had taught her to do, when she felt the small, hot animal in her chest demand a response she could not afford. 6, 7, 8. Each length of hair fell with the soft sound of a page being turned in a book no one was meant to read. The autumn light through the bedroom window was the pale, level light of a Wiltshire afternoon at the end of October. It made the strands on the floor look almost black against the rose and cream Aubusson carpet her father had carried back from France the year before the world stopped being kind to him. She watched her own face in the mirror with the dispassionate interest she might have brought to a stranger's. Grey eyes. A mouth that her father had once told her resembled her mother's. A line of jaw that even cropped hair could not disguise. She was 26 years old, and tomorrow she would still be 26 years old, and her stepmother had not yet understood that hair was the least of what she had to lose. "There," said Marjorie, stepping back. She set the shears down on the dressing table beside Cordelia's silver brushes, where they gleamed like a small, well-bred predator at rest. "Much more sensible. You will pass for a governess, which is approximately what you ought to be aiming for at your age." Cordelia raised her eyes to the mirror. The hair that remained sat against her skull in uneven, hacked layers, the longest piece just brushing her jaw, the shortest above her ear, like the work of a careless soldier. Without the weight of it, her face looked unexpectedly clear, every line of cheekbone and brow and throat suddenly visible, like a portrait that had been hidden beneath 3 coats of varnish, and now stood unprotected to the room. She did not look like a governess. She looked like a woman who had been deliberately stripped, and who had not yet decided what to do about it. "You may go down," Marjorie said, "or you may keep to your chamber. I had thought to suggest the second. We can tell the Duke you are indisposed." "I am not indisposed." "You will be, by the time His Grace's carriage reaches the door." She crossed to the bell rope and pulled it twice. Somewhere in the house a small bell sounded. 2 pulls. Hot water for the morning room. Marjorie had been ringing the household bells in her own particular dialect for the 4 years since she had become Lord Ashbourne's widow and Cordelia's only family by law. "Whatever you have promised yourself you would do today," Marjorie added at the door, almost pleasantly, "I would advise against doing it. Your father's name carries less weight than you imagine. The Duke of Ravenholt is not coming here for you, Cordelia. He is coming because every door in 3 counties has been closed to him already, and ours, regrettably, is still open. Try to be useful and silent. Cyril will see him in the library." The door closed. Cordelia did not move for a long moment. Then, very deliberately, she reached forward and picked up one of the longest fallen lengths of hair from the carpet. She lifted it into the light. It was the color of strong tea with the sun behind it, exactly the shade her father had always said reminded him of her mother. She wound it around her finger, 3 slow turns, and pressed her thumb against it, and felt the small, hot animal in her chest sit down obediently and wait. She was not going to cry. She was going to be in the library when the Duke of Ravenholt arrived, and he was not coming because every other door was shut to him. That was the part Marjorie had not understood, and that nobody in this house had understood for nearly 4 years now. He was coming because someone in this house, 3 winters ago, had sent him a letter that had probably saved his career, and he had been looking ever since for the woman who wrote it. He simply did not know yet that it had been her. The maid Sarah came in with the hot water before Cordelia had quite decided what to do with her face. Sarah was a square, sensible girl of 19, who had been at Ashbourne Park since she was 12, and who had loved Cordelia's father with the unsentimental devotion that good servants reserve for masters who treat them as though they had souls. She set the brass jug down on the washstand, looked at the floor, looked at Cordelia, and made a sound that was half a swallowed word and half a small sob she refused to release. "Oh, miss. Don't. Miss Cordelia, your hair." "I said don't, Sarah." Sarah crossed the room without permission and picked up the longest fallen length, the one Cordelia had not been able to retrieve, and folded it into a neat coil. Her hands were shaking. She tucked the coil into the pocket of her apron with the air of a woman concealing evidence. "His Grace has come over the rise," she said quietly, not looking up. "Mr. Bentham saw the outriders from the south paddock and came in. There are 4 of them, 2 carriages. He will be at the door in 20 minutes. 2 carriages? Yes, miss." Cordelia let out a slow breath. Marjorie had said the Duke was coming because every other door was shut to him. 2 carriages and 4 outriders did not look like a man whose doors had been shut. It looked like a man arriving on his own terms. "My green silk, Sarah," she said. "The one with the bronze trim." Sarah stopped. "Miss, your hair—" "I have an hour to do something about my hair." "Lady Marjorie said—" "Lady Marjorie is not the mistress of this house. She is the widow of its previous master. There is a difference." Cordelia stood. The strands on the floor moved slightly with her, like dry autumn leaves. "Bring me the green silk, and bring me the small pearl combs from my mother's box." "Miss, there is barely enough hair left for combs." "There is enough." Cordelia met Sarah's eyes in the mirror. "There is exactly enough." Sarah went, and for a moment Cordelia allowed herself the single luxury she had refused all morning. She pressed both palms flat against the dressing table, leaned forward, and breathed in once, deeply, the air that smelled of cut hair and cold wood smoke from the unlit grate, and the faint, ghostly trace of her father's pipe tobacco that had never quite left this room. Then she straightened. The dressing table mirror, beheld coldly, told her something Marjorie had not realized. With the hair gone, the eyes were larger. The mouth was nearer to the center of the face. The line of the throat, long, fine, descending in a single unbroken curve to the collarbone, was, for the first time in her life, fully visible. Marjorie had thought she was destroying her stepdaughter's appearance. What she had done, in fact, was uncover it. By the time Sarah returned with the gown and the pearl combs and a small bottle of rose water and a face that had decided to be useful instead of sentimental, Cordelia had washed the loose ends from her neck and tucked what was left of her hair behind her ears with 2 of the pearl combs. The effect was unexpected. Stark, certainly. Severe, perhaps. But the green silk had been her father's favorite of all her gowns, and against it, the cropped chestnut framed her face like the deliberate choice of a woman who had nothing to apologize for. She turned, lifted her chin, and walked out of the bedroom to meet a man who had been looking for her for 3 years, without knowing her name. Cyril Ashburn was waiting on the half landing, blocking the descent. He was Lord Ashburn's only son by Marjorie, a soft-featured young man of 23, with his mother's pale eyes and none of her competence, and a perpetual look of having just remembered an injury he meant to revenge. He was wearing his shooting coat, although he had never shot anything more dangerous than a hedgerow rabbit in his life, and he stood with one hand on the banister as though he had been posted there. "You are not going down," he said, I am going down. Mother said, Cyril. She stopped one step above him, which made her almost his height. Step aside. His Grace is here on a matter of business. Mother has explained that I will receive him. You will remain on this floor until called for. There is no business at Ashburn Park that does not involve me. Cyril smiled. It was a small, careful smile, the kind he had been practicing since he was 16, for the moment he became master of the house. He had been waiting for it for 4 years, and the wait had not improved him. You are forgetting yourself, he said. And you are forgetting that this house, while my mother's, is mine by entail in 11 months, after which we will speak again, Cyril. Today is not 11 months from now. She stepped past him on the side away from the banister. He did not move to stop her physically. That would have required a kind of decision Cyril had never quite been able to make. But he turned to watch her descend with the expression of a man who had just realized his small, careful smile had not worked. He will not want you, he called after her, low, so it would not carry to the hall below. Mother has seen to that. Look at yourself. Cordelia did not pause. I have looked, she said, without turning. Cyril, you have no idea what he wants. Neither does your mother. The hall below was already in motion. Bentham, the butler, an old man who had served 3 generations of Ashbournes, and who was the second person in the house, after Sarah, who had wept the day Cordelia's father had been laid in the chapel vault, was standing by the front door, with the air of a man holding himself at attention. 2 footmen flanked him. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels on gravel had given way to the softer crunch of horses being brought to a halt. A coachman called. A door opened. Bentham caught Cordelia's eye as she crossed the hall. The look in his face was not surprise, although he must have seen her shorn head, and not pity, which she would not have forgiven. It was something closer to a salute. He gave her the smallest possible nod, an inch, perhaps less, and turned the great key in the front door. His Grace, the Duke of Ravenholt, he announced as the door swung wide. The man who stepped into the hall of Ashbourne Park was not what Cyril had expected, and not, in the end, quite what Cordelia had expected either, although she had 3 years of letters in her head to prepare her. He was 28, tall in the way that made doorways look ill-considered, with the sort of broad-shouldered build that comes from horses and sword exercise, and not from country idleness. His coat was a deep, fine bottle green, cut by someone who knew his shoulders. His hair was the color of dark wheat, slightly disordered by the ride. His face was made of clean planes, a nose that had been broken once and set well, a mouth that did not yet know it was meant to be amused, and a pair of grey eyes that were, in that first second, doing what grey eyes did very well, which was missing absolutely nothing. He saw her at once. He saw the cropped hair, the green silk, the pearl combs, the steadiness of her stance at the foot of the staircase. He saw all of it the way a man reads the title page of a book he has been hunting for in 3 counties. His expression did not change in any way the room could have used against him. But Cordelia, who had been counting since the shears, recognized the small, precise stillness that came over him, as the same stillness she had felt in herself when the first lock fell. He had seen her before. Not in person, but he had seen her. He bowed. Lady Cordelia, he said, before Bentham had finished introducing him, and before either Marjorie, descending the stair behind her with her best smile arranged, or Cyril, 6 steps higher, could intervene. Forgive me. I have ridden a long way and come into your hall with my dust still on me. I was told you would not be receiving. I am receiving, Cordelia said. So I see. There was a small silence. Marjorie reached the foot of the stair, swept past Cordelia with the practiced ease of a woman who had spent 4 years pretending to be the lady of a house that was not hers, and curtsied to the exact depth one offers a duke. Your Grace, welcome to Ashbourne Park. I am Lady Ashbourne. I see you have already met my late husband's daughter. I have, said the Duke. His eyes had not left Cordelia. My son will see you in the library, Marjorie continued. We have prepared refreshment. Cordelia, my dear, you should sit by the fire in the morning room. The journey downstairs has clearly tired you. I'm not tired, said Cordelia. Your colour is high. You are tired. My colour is high, said Cordelia, because I am about to ask His Grace whether he would prefer his refreshment in the library or in the morning room, as he has come a long way, and as it is my house. For 1/2 second, Marjorie's smile did not move. The footmen, behind their wooden faces, did not breathe. Cyril, halfway down the staircase, made a small, strangled noise. In the library, I think, said the Duke, with the perfect indifference of a man who had not heard the contradiction at all. If Lady Cordelia would do me the honour of conducting me there. Of course, Your Grace. She turned and walked, and behind her she heard the Duke fall into step at a measured pace, and behind him she heard Marjorie begin, in the lowest possible voice, the kind of instruction to Cyril that mothers reserved for sons who had just disappointed them in public. None of it carried. Cordelia did not look back. She had not expected to look up at the Duke as he entered. She had not expected him to look at her as if he already knew her name. She had certainly not expected, as they reached the library doors, and he opened the right-hand one for her with the easy, automatic courtesy of a man who had been raised to open doors and not to think about it afterwards, that he would say, in a voice meant only for her, "You wrote the letter." She closed the library door behind them. It was the room she had loved most in the house, long, low-ceilinged, lined on 3 walls with bookcases her father had built up over 30 years, with 2 tall sash windows facing west across the park to a strip of beechwood that was now half gold and half bare. A fire had been laid, but not lit. The smell was of old leather and beeswax, and the faint, dry powder of paper. Her father's reading chair stood beside the fireplace. She had not allowed Marjorie to redo it. "Your Grace," she said, "sit down." He did not. He stood inside the door, holding his riding gloves in one hand, the other resting easily at his side. And he was looking at her with such open, steady attention that she had to remind herself she was not the one obliged to speak first. "You wrote the letter," he said again. "I wrote no letter to you." "You wrote the letter that went to my mentor, Lord Drayton, in March of 12. The one that corrected the manuscript he was about to publish. The Tacitus translation." She did not answer. "It was a 53-page corrigendum," he said. "Page references, Latin parallels, 3 citations from a 15th century commentary I had never heard of. It was signed only with a Greek letter. Lord Drayton did not publish. He was lost to us 8 months later, believing he had been saved from a public humiliation by an anonymous classicist in the country. I am very sorry to hear of Lord Drayton's loss. 3 years ago, after the Duke paused. After his affairs were closed, his papers came to me as his godson. The letter was among them. I have been looking ever since for the person who wrote it. I had assumed a man, a clergyman, possibly an Oxford fellow living quietly in retirement. I traced the handwriting through several routes that need not concern us." He paused again, and a small, dry, almost unwilling humour entered his voice for the first time. 3 weeks ago, I matched it to an account book from Ashbourne Park, lodged with the London Bank. The hand of the late Lord Ashbourne's daughter. That account book was in my father's hand. It was in the hand of someone who had been keeping it for him, while his own hand was no longer steady. There is no signature on either document, but the downstroke of the lowercase y is unmistakable. I had it compared by 3 experts. I came here to ask the woman who wrote that letter whether she would care to come to London and assist me, with the same translation I have now undertaken to finish, on Lord Drayton's behalf. You have ridden 2 days to offer me a clerical post. I have ridden 2 days to offer you a partnership. The word landed in the quiet library, like a coin dropped on a hardwood floor. Cordelia did not move. The cropped ends of her hair brushed her jawline as she turned her head a quarter inch towards the window. Outside, a pair of rooks were circling above the beechwood. She watched them, because watching them gave her face somewhere to be that was not pointed at the Duke of Ravenholt. You have not asked, she said, why my stepmother cut my hair this morning. I do not require you to explain your stepmother to me. I have known women like Lady Marjorie. Then you understand that whatever you have come to offer me, she has set herself, in the next 2 hours, to refuse on my behalf. She cannot refuse on your behalf. The post would be mine to offer and yours to accept. She will tell you that I am unwell, or unstable, or unmarriageable, or all three, depending on which she thinks will move you fastest out of the house. I am not easily moved out of houses. She turned to face him then. The Duke had not crossed the room. He was still standing inside the door, gloves in one hand, the other still at his side. His expression was open in a way that she found, against her will, almost difficult to look at. Not because it was warm, although it was, but because it was unguarded. No man had looked at her this directly since her father. Your Grace, she said, I should like to ask you a question. Ask it. If I had been sitting in my room, with my hair as it was this morning, long, ungifted, untouched by my stepmother's shears, would your offer be exactly the same? He looked at her. He did not answer at once. He was a man, she realized, who took questions seriously. It would be exactly the same, he said, except for one detail. And that is? I would not yet have seen what you look like when someone tries to cut you down. She felt the small, hot animal in her chest sit up and pay attention. She turned her head deliberately back towards the window. You may sit down, Your Grace. Thank you. He sat in her father's chair, with the precise, unconscious courtesy of a man who chose chairs by where they put his back. She did not sit. She walked the length of the long library table, pretending to consider a folio of botanical engravings that her father had bound himself. Refreshment will be brought in, she said, over her shoulder. My stepmother will arrange that the maid who brings it is one of hers. Anything you say in the next 30 minutes will reach her by sundown. Then we should make the next 30 minutes worth her trouble. For the first time since the shears had closed, Cordelia smiled. It was not a wide smile. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement at one corner of the mouth, the kind her father had called the smile of a girl who has just understood a Latin pun. She turned, leaned her hip against the edge of the table, folded her arms across the green silk, and looked at the Duke of Ravenholt as if for the first time. Very well, Your Grace, she said. Tell me what you have actually come to offer. What he had come to offer, it turned out, was something more complicated than a clerical post, and more honest than a courtship. Lord Drayton's translation of the Annals, 3 full books, had been 3/4 finished at the time of his loss, and the publishing committee in London, which included 2 old men who had been kind to Drayton, and 1 young one who had not, had agreed to bring the work out under the editorial care of his godson, the Duke. The Duke had spent the better part of a year on it. He was a competent Latinist, he said, and an honest one, but he was not a great one, and he had reached, 3 weeks ago, a passage in the 2nd book that he could not in conscience finish without consulting the only living person who had publicly bested Drayton on a point of Tacitian syntax. That person was you, he said. That person was anonymous. That person, Lady Cordelia, signed the letter with a gamma. A gamma is not a signature. It was on Drayton's account in the British Library as recently as last spring. He used to refer to you as Gamma. He thought you were a man. His mouth twitched once. He thought you were a man at All Souls, going under the name to spare a college dispute. He drank to your health every Christmas Eve for the last decade of his life. He had no idea he had been corrected by Lord Ashbourne's daughter at 23. 22. At 22, then. There was a small silence. Cordelia looked at the Duke's hands. They were a working man's hands more than a Duke's, broad, lightly calloused along the inside of the thumb, a faint scar across the back of the left one in the place where a man with a hunter's history of fences carried such things. "Why did you write that letter?" he asked. "Because Lord Drayton was about to publish a translation that mistook the Latin pluperfect for the imperfect, in a passage that completely altered the meaning of Tacitus's account of the Pisonian conspiracy. And because my father, who had corresponded with him for 20 years, was no longer well enough to write the correction himself." "You wrote in his place?" "I wrote in his hand, Your Grace. There is a difference. He read every page before it went. I did not invent his correction. I made it for him." "He must have been very proud of you." "He was gone 8 weeks later." She heard the word too late to soften it. It landed in the library as plainly as the word partnership had a quarter-hour before. She did not apologize for it. "And my stepmother did not know about the letter. She still does not. It was the last thing my father and I built together, and it was the first thing I made certain she would never use against me." "She does not know now." "She does not know now." "Will she know?" he asked carefully. "In an hour, when refreshment is brought in, what you and I have just discussed." "What she will hear, Your Grace, is that you have asked me to come to London and work as your assistant translator, that I have agreed, and that you have agreed to settle £2,000 a year on me for the duration of the project." "2,000 a year?" "It is the standard fee for a senior editor at the Quarterly. I checked 3 years ago. I had thought I might be one, someday, under another name." He laughed. It was the first laugh he had given the room, and it was a real one, not a polite one, and it broke across his face the way unexpected weather breaks across a hilltop, fast, complete, and over before it had quite finished. He did not apologize for it. He picked up his gloves from the arm of the chair, put them carefully down again, and said, "2,000 a year. Done." "You have not asked what conditions I attach." "I assume you have several." "I have 3. "I am listening." "First, you will engage me under my own name, not Gamma, not a male pseudonym. Cordelia Ashbourne. When the book is published, you will name me on the title page as your co-editor." "Done." "Second, you will write a letter today, witnessed by Mr. Bentham, our butler, recording the engagement and the fee. The letter will be kept in this library, in a place known to Bentham and to me, and a copy will be sent by tonight's post to my father's solicitor at Lincoln's Inn." "Done." "Third," she paused. She was not sure she had the words for the third condition, until she heard herself say them. "Third, you will not on any account, in this house or in London, refer to my hair." He did not laugh that time. He looked at her, very steady, for the length of a breath, and he said, "Lady Cordelia, I had not intended to refer to your hair in this house or in London before this conversation began. I do not intend to refer to it now." "Thank you." "On one condition of my own." "What is that?" "That when the annals are published and the title page is set, I am permitted to choose the dedication." "To whom?" "To Lord Ashbourne. With one phrase: in gratitude for the daughter he made." For 3 seconds, Cordelia did not breathe. Then she crossed the library, picked up the inkwell from her father's desk, and set it down within reach of the Duke's chair. "Bentham," she said, walking to the door, "will bring you paper." He stayed 3 days. Marjorie, who had spent the first afternoon laying traps with the careful skill of a woman who had run a small estate's social warfare for 4 years, discovered by the evening of the second day that none of her traps had closed. The Duke would not be drawn into an interview alone with her in the morning room. He would not accept the bed she had had prepared for him in the south wing, too far from the library, he said pleasantly, where the work was. He would not let Cyril sit with him at dinner. He would not, when asked, comment on Cordelia's appearance, although he answered every other social question Marjorie put to him with the polite, patient detail of a man who had grown up in courts of inquiry. The household, which had spent 4 years organized around Marjorie's preferences, took roughly 36 hours to begin reorganizing itself around the Duke's. Bentham did so first, deliberately, with a small, private satisfaction that Cordelia caught once in the mirror over the sideboard and almost laughed at aloud. Sarah did so second, because Sarah loved Cordelia and would have served any man who treated her well. The 2 footmen followed. By the morning of the third day, the kitchen had begun sending up the small dishes that Cordelia had favored as a girl, dishes Marjorie had banned from the menus 4 years ago, on the grounds that they were common. Buttered eggs, soft cheese on toast, dried cherries soaked in cognac. Marjorie noticed. Of course, she noticed. She noticed, too, the way the Duke walked beside Cordelia each afternoon, at the same time of day, in the same long sweep down through the park to the river and back. His head bent very slightly to hear what Cordelia was saying, his hands clasped behind him in the easy, practiced attitude of a man who could have made any number of physical gestures, and was choosing, deliberately, not to. She noticed that Cordelia's pearl combs were polished every morning. She noticed that Cordelia had begun, in the evenings, to read aloud from the second book of the Annals while the Duke wrote, both of them sitting at opposite ends of the long library table, with a single brace of candles between them. She noticed that the library door was always kept ajar an inch, and that Mr. Bentham passed it on the half hour, as if by chance. She also noticed, on the morning of the third day, that something had altered in her stepdaughter's bearing, that Cordelia, who had walked Ashbourne Park for 4 years as a guest in her own house, was beginning to walk it as a woman who knew exactly where she was. Marjorie did the only thing left to her. She wrote a letter. She wrote it in the small writing room beside her bedroom, in her own hand, on Ashbourne paper, with the seal of the late Lord Ashbourne pressed into the wax at the bottom. She addressed it to His Grace the Duke of Ravenholt at the house in Berkeley Square. She enclosed it in a second envelope, sealed and addressed to herself, and called Cyril. "I want you to take this to London on Friday morning," she said. "Have it delivered to His Grace's house. You will inform the porter that it was left in your charge by a person who did not wish to be named, and that you were paid 6pence to bring it as far as the door. You will hand it over and leave. You understand?" "Mother, Cyril, do you want this estate or not?" He took the letter. It would arrive in London 4 days after the Duke himself, which would give Marjorie's plot, she calculated, exactly enough time to ripen. She locked the writing room behind her. She went down to take her tea in the morning room, with the expression of a woman who had remembered, between courses, that she was the mistress of the house. On the morning of his departure, the Duke walked with Cordelia one last time to the foot of the beech avenue. The frost had thickened overnight. Their breath made small ghosts that travelled with them. A robin sang from the top of a yew, 3 notes and a fourth, the same phrase repeated as though it were the only one he had been taught. "You will come to London on the 20th, he said. "I will send my mother's carriage. She is at Ravenholt House for the winter. She is—" he chose the word with care— "interested in meeting you." "Has she been told about me?" "She has been told that I am bringing a co-editor to Ravenholt House for the publication of Drayton's Annals. She has been told that this co-editor is a lady. She knows nothing else. Whatever the rest of London begins to say, she will know before they do, and she will, if you do not object, be your shield until you choose otherwise." "And what will the rest of London begin to say?" The Duke considered the avenue ahead of them. The beeches stood in 2 long rows, half their leaves already on the ground, the morning light falling in lozenges across the gravel. "They will say," he said, "that the Duke of Ravenholt has brought a young woman of unusual learning to live under his mother's roof. They will say that her hair is short. They will speculate as to why. They will agree, in time, that the explanation must be either scandal or religious mania. They will, the more careful among them, ask who her people were. They will find out about your father. They will be, in private, more impressed than they will say." "And in public?" "In public, Lady Cordelia, they will be afraid of you. They will be afraid because you will know things at dinner tables that no woman of your age in London is supposed to know, and because you will know them more accurately than the men in the room, and because, when challenged, you will be unable to pretend you do not. They will be afraid of you, and from fear, they will reach, sooner or later, for the easiest weapon any drawing room ever offered against a woman. Which is the suggestion that she is the Duke's mistress. He said it plainly, without softening, because she had asked plainly. She nodded, also without softening, and looked at the robin in the yew until she had finished thinking. "And what will be done about that suggestion?" "It will be answered," said the Duke, "by me, and by my mother, and by Lord Drayton's surviving brother, and by the title page of the annals. It will be answered, if the matter goes further than answers, by a marriage settlement. But that, Lady Cordelia, is your decision to make in your own time, and I have not come here to extract it from you by means of an honor you did not choose." "That is a great deal of architecture, Your Grace, to support a translation of Tacitus." "It is a great deal of architecture, Lady Cordelia, because what we are about to do is not, in fact, the translation of Tacitus." "Is it not?" "No. The translation is the public name of the thing. The actual thing is the entry of one woman of unusual learning into the upper edge of public life under the cover of a publishing project. We are going to publish Drayton's Annals. We are also going to publish you. The first will take 10 months. The second will take the rest of your life." She was silent for a long moment. "I had not thought of it in those terms." "You did not need to think of it in those terms when you sat in this house writing in the dark. You will need to in London." "Your Grace, Marcus." His Christian name had come out before she had quite intended it to, and his expression did not move except for one small involuntary tightening at the corner of the eye that she did not yet know how to read. "I should like to think for the rest of today, and answer you when you ride out." "I would not have you do otherwise." They walked back to the house in silence. The robin in the yew gave up his 4 notes and tried another phrase. The frost on the gravel cracked faintly under their boots. At the door, the Duke bowed, and Cordelia curtsied, and Marjorie, who had been watching from the morning-room window for the last quarter of an hour, lowered the curtain at exactly the moment they could not see her. Cordelia did not go in. She turned aside at the porch and walked, alone, down the side of the house to the small walled garden, where her father had kept his medicinal herbs, and where, in the 3rd winter of his illness, he had taken to sitting in a brick alcove out of the wind to watch his daughter pick the last of the rosemary for the kitchen. The bench was still there. The rosemary was still there. Nothing in this house, Cordelia had often thought, had moved an inch since her father had set it down. She sat on the bench. The cold of the brick came through the green silk. She did not move. She wanted, for 1/4 hour, to be cold, because she wanted to think clearly, and clarity for her had always been a slightly cold thing. She had been offered a life. Not, in the end, the life she had once imagined for herself. Quiet rooms, modest competence, a steady correspondence with Oxford men under another name. The life she had been offered this morning was a different one entirely. It was a life of unfamiliar visibility. It was a life in which her own name would appear on a title page in 3 counties' bookshops. It was a life in which a duke's mother would be her shield, which meant that for some period, perhaps months, perhaps years, she would owe a debt to a woman she had not yet met. It was, possibly, a life in which she would marry, although the Duke had refused to make that a condition. It was, certainly, a life that contained the Duke himself, every morning across a library table, his head bent in concentration, his hands occasionally turning a page with the careful gentleness she had already begun to catalogue. She did not know whether she loved him. She knew that she had laughed in the library 3 times in the last 3 days. She had not laughed 3 times in the 4 years before that, taken together. That was not love. But it was something close enough to be alarming. She also knew, with the cold, flat clarity she had inherited from her father, that whatever she felt or did not feel, the Duke had told her the truth on the avenue. The thing was not Tacitus. The thing was her, brought into a kind of public daylight she had never asked for, with a man at her side who had ridden 2 days to find her and offered her a partnership before he offered her anything else. A pair of small footsteps crunched on the gravel. "Miss?" Sarah, breathing fast, the coil of saved hair still apparently in her pocket, because Sarah had become, in the last 72 hours, the most loyal conspirator any woman ever had. "Mr. Bentham asks if you would come into the library. His Grace is gone, but Mr. Bentham has a letter for you from a London solicitor." "From Lincoln's Inn?" "He thinks so, miss." Cordelia stood. The cold from the bench had done its work. She felt, walking back into the house, exactly as she had felt at 6 in the morning, when her stepmother had picked up the shears and asked her to hold still. Clear in the head, calm in the hand, and unwilling to be moved from a path she had not chosen, but was not, now, going to refuse. The letter on the library table was, as Bentham had thought, from her father's solicitor. It was a copy of the engagement letter the Duke had written 3 days ago in this room, and which had gone by night post to Lincoln's Inn at her insistence. It was witnessed in Bentham's careful copperplate. It bore the Duke's signature at the bottom: Marcus Henry Alaric Stanton, Ravenholt. And beside it, in a smaller hand, the solicitor had penciled the words, "Filed in the Ashbourne Deeds Box, 14th instant. Acknowledged. H. Carruthers." She folded the letter into the inside pocket of her stepmother's least favourite cloak and walked back upstairs to write the Duke's answer. 3 days later, on a wet Friday morning in November, the second carriage from the South Paddock at Ashbourne Park set out for London with Cordelia inside it. She wore the green silk under a thick travelling cape. The pearl combs were in her travelling case. Sarah sat across from her, plump and silent and proud, with the saved coil of chestnut hair still in her apron pocket, because Sarah was not a woman who let evidence be thrown away. In Marjorie's writing room that same morning, Cyril stood awkwardly with his mother's letter inside his coat, listening to her instructions for the 3rd time. "The porter is to be paid 6pence. 6pence, yes. You will not say my name. You will not say your name. I will not say my name. You will leave the letter and you will leave the house. I will leave the house. Cyril." She gripped his wrist. "If you bring me back this letter undelivered, I will see that you do not see the house again." "Mother, I will deliver the letter." She let go. She watched, from the window of the writing room, the second carriage pull away from the porch with her stepdaughter inside it. The robin in the yew was silent that morning. The frost was almost gone. The world had warmed 1/2 a degree, in the perverse way the English weather sometimes does on the day a woman loses something for which she has been planning for 4 years. By Tuesday morning, Marjorie had calculated, the letter would have reached the Duke. By Wednesday, the rumours she had carefully seeded with 2 cousins in town would have reached the Duke's mother. By Friday, at the latest, the Duke would have understood that the woman he had brought to London was not the woman she had pretended to be. And the woman he had brought to London, Cordelia, the unexpected, the dangerous, the suddenly visible Cordelia, would be on the road back to Ashbourne Park. Marjorie turned away from the window. She rang the bell 3 times. Tea for 1 in the morning room. She had 11 months, she thought, to win the entail back for her son. She had perhaps fewer than 3 weeks before the Duke of Ravenholt would arrive at her door a second time. Cordelia reached Berkeley Square at sunset on the second day of travel. The Dowager Duchess of Ravenholt was waiting in the hall. She was not, as Cordelia had half expected, an imposing woman. She was small, perhaps an inch shorter than Cordelia, with white hair drawn back into a knot that revealed an unfashionably high forehead, and grey eyes very like her son's. She wore a plain grey silk with 1 row of jet beads. She did not curtsy, because she did not curtsy to anyone, but she stepped forward, took both of Cordelia's hands in her own. They were small, dry, faintly warm, and looked her steadily in the face. "You are Lord Ashbourne's daughter," she said. "I am." "My son tells me you corrected Drayton on a point of Latin syntax at 22 and wrote a 53-page corrigendum in your father's hand." "I did." "I should like to know," said the Duchess of Ravenholt evenly, "whether you also play the pianoforte, because if you do, I should like you to spend half an hour after supper playing for me, in order to find out whether I am going to like you, because I find I make up my mind faster about people who play." "I play badly, Your Grace." "Then we shall enjoy it together." Cordelia laughed for the 4th time in 8 days. The Duke, who had been standing in the doorway of the small drawing-room and had clearly been watching his mother and her co-editor very narrowly during this exchange, said nothing. But he smiled, once. A small, quick smile that was gone before Cordelia could quite meet his eye, and turned away to attend to a footman. Berkeley Square had welcomed her. It would, she thought, take her some time to understand exactly what it was she had been welcomed into. The first 10 days of the work fell into a shape neither of them had quite expected. They began at 9 in the morning in the Duke's library, which faced east and was filled, by 9:30, with the kind of pale, clear London light that made paper look very white and ink very dark. The Duke worked at the long table near the window. Cordelia worked at a smaller desk set at right angles to his, perhaps 2 yards away, with her father's annotated Tacitus and the Duke's manuscript pages set out in front of her. She read aloud. He wrote. He read aloud. She wrote. Between them, on the table, sat a brace of candles that were never lit, because the daylight in this room was so generous that no one needed them. They worked, the first morning, for 3 hours without a single private word. They worked, the second morning, for 3 hours, and exchanged exactly 4 sentences, all of them about the Latin pluperfect. By the 5th morning, Cordelia could read his handwriting without effort, and he could anticipate her objections 2 pages in advance, and they had begun to laugh, occasionally, at the small absurdities that the late Lord Drayton had left behind for them. A marginal note in violet pencil that read, "Dull but true." A Latin pun he had attempted in a footnote. A date he had recorded incorrectly because he had a personal feud with his housekeeper that year and could not concentrate. It was the Dowager Duchess who insisted, on the 7th evening, that they were not to dine alone together. "My dear," she said to her son, over Cordelia's head, in the manner of a woman who had decided long ago to deliver her important communications in front of any witness within reach. "You are going to ruin the girl by accident if you go on as you are. You will dine with me and with Lady Cordelia every evening this week, and we will have one guest at table at least 3 nights in 5. Beginning with Lord Sefton on Thursday. He is harmless. He will see her, and he will tell 3 drawing rooms about her by Friday, and that is precisely what I require." "Mother, the work is going excellently. The work has nothing to do with what we are discussing. I am proposing to construct a small social fortification around the lady before anyone else has time to dig a trench." "You are using military metaphors at dinner again." "I am using military metaphors at dinner because we are at war, my dear, and you have not yet noticed." The Duke set down his fork. "Mother," he said quietly, "I have noticed." It was the first time, in Cordelia's company, that he had referred even indirectly to the fact that they were at war. She did not raise her eyes from her plate. She did, however, set her own spoon very carefully across the rim of the porcelain, a small, deliberate gesture that the Dowager Duchess did not miss, although she pretended not to see it. "Then we are agreed," said the Duchess. "Lord Sefton on Thursday." "Lord Sefton on Thursday." "Lady Cordelia." "Your Grace." "You will wear the dark gold." "I do not own a dark gold gown." "You will have one by Thursday. Don't fuss. I have an excellent woman in Conduit Street." Cordelia did not protest. She had spent 10 days now in the orbit of the Dowager Duchess of Ravenholt, and she had learned, very quickly, that arguing with her was like arguing with weather. One simply turned one's collar up and waited. But she did, that night, on the way to her bedroom, put her hand on the Duke's sleeve as they passed in the upper hall. He stopped at once. "You should not let your mother dress me," she said quietly. "My mother is going to dress every woman who comes into this house from now until she is no longer with us. If you are concerned about it, I will speak to her." "It is not the dress. It is—" She paused, and the cropped chestnut hair brushed the collar of her travelling cape, and she found, to her own surprise, that her voice was almost steady. "It is that I do not yet know what shape I am in this house. I came as your co-editor. Your mother is treating me as a daughter-in-law in waiting, and neither of us has discussed it with each other, or with me." "You are right," he said. "I have been—" He closed his eyes for half a second, and opened them again, with the same clean, steady attention he had brought into her library 3 weeks before. "I have been treating the question of the shape of you in this house with the cowardice of a man who is happy in the meantime, and does not wish to disturb a happiness he is not yet sure he has earned." "Marcus." "Cordelia. I am not asking you to declare an intention tonight. I am asking you to be the man you were on the avenue at Ashbourne, the one who told me precisely what we were doing." He nodded once. "On Friday," he said. "After Sefton. I will tell you, after Sefton, exactly what I am proposing, work and otherwise. And you will tell me, after Sefton, exactly what you require of me. We will not pretend, after Sefton, but we are anything other than what we are. Will you accept those terms?"